Good day, Mr. Langell. How's it going?
Good day, sir. I always think too long to answer this question. It's okay. We're a little less early than is often the case, so it's nice to have slept in a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get it 8 hours?
I did get 8 hours, but
Wow.
the only reason my body let me get 8 hours is because the night before I got about probably 1.5. And
Nice.
so, since I was practically dying last
So,
night, I just passed
okay.
out.
So you're averaging a little bit more than 4 then.
Yeah. So the average is not too far off the usual,
The
but
standard.
it was a good night. How about you?
Nice. Yeah, I think I'm pretty consistently getting 6.5 to 7.5 hours these days.
Right on, right on. I've been exercising a lot more, and those
Me
days,
too.
nice, nice, nice. There you go. I find those days I can sleep a lot more soundly if I'm like really exhausted afterwards,
Yeah.
um, and so that's definitely helped.
I think in March last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, we stopped having to go to the office to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so without a commute, I no longer exercised.
Right
So,
on.
so I've officially been exercising every day for about a week and a half now. Since
Week and a half. Nice. No,
yeah,
awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. What is exercise
I've got an
entail for you?
exercise bike,
Nice.
which I've owned the entirety of the time I've lived in Montreal. I've just not used it,
Right
but I've decided to actually enforce lunch breaks on myself now instead of just continuing to work.
on.
And so during my lunch break, I put on a show on Netflix and I use my exercise bike.
Yes, I also had an exercise bike, and I used to do that as well. They had a gym here, they have a gym at the condo I live in, and because of the pandemic, it was closed for like a year and a half or something.
Hmm.
And they recently opened it because like the regulations lightened or whatever and let them open it. So I
Hmm.
did the exercise bike thing for a while. It's kind of funny because I was watching the very first Gundam, which I mean
Nice.
I don't even really watch cartoons too much or whatever, but like I was watching it fairly religiously, and then they opened the gym and I just stopped immediately. Like the only reason I was watching it is because I was doing the exercise bike thing. So
Yeah, it's the same rate. I'm watching a show called Suits, which is lawyers
I think
pretending to be in New York when they're actually in Toronto.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I know the show. My wife watches it or used to, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew nothing of it other than that it's like 42 minutes per episode and there's 9 seasons
Uh,
of it. So I figure if I just watch the entirety of that while I'm on my bike every day, then
That's
it'll
that's hilarious that that's the criteria you've chosen. It's long enough that I won't run out of it, so I will watch it and enforce my exercise regime that way.
yeah, it's like I'm going to be getting at least 3 months of exercise out of this, and it's like not too short.
Right on.
I can finish it during my lunch break.
Nice, nice. I'm very much not a lunch break person. I even when I was at the office, I very rarely took lunch breaks.
It was hit and miss for me when I worked in film. We tended to go to restaurants or take our packed lunches to a park or something almost every day.
Hmm.
Um, and then in the games industry, it seems like everyone opted to stay at their desks and they usually take breaks,
You think
but
that's
it's
is
like,
it it's an industry thing, not like just the
well,
companies
it's
you've worked at?
what yeah, it's definitely, every single employee in every single studio is identical. No, the two studios that I worked at, that seemed to be a common thing, um, is that everyone would just like watch Netflix or Twitch or something at their desks.
Right.
They did still take a break. They didn't work, but they didn't leave their desk.
I see. I see. Yeah, since the pandemic started, I mean, I don't really take lunch breaks, but I'll go like lay down for 10 minutes here and there just because I'm tired.
Well, every now and then I'll lay down for more than 10 minutes, but
Well, so I used to work at Microsoft, which of the big tech companies is fairly known for like giving you your own office. Most companies don't
yeah,
do that. I actually
yeah.
don't know if Microsoft even still does that. But because you had your own office, I actually had coworkers that would just do exactly that. Like at lunch, they just shut their door and just lay on the floor for an hour. and
I,
or like
I,
they would literally put like a little cot in their office and
yeah,
sleep every day. And I don't know. It
yeah.
seems it might strike you as weird, but I mean, why not? It's like
I mean, it does and it doesn't. Like I have on at least one occasion, on two occasions throughout my career, I have not left the office within like a 36-hour period of time.
I think you told me about one of those times. I feel.
I mean, they were both pretty self inflicted, but it's like the case where it's like you feel like there's a deadline that's
Mhm.
looming, and you just when you're in film, you gotta wait. Like if you're doing visual effects stuff, like you just gotta wait. You do a simulation, and it's gonna take potentially hours.
Mhm.
Um, but the question is, if it's a short enough duration, is it a better use of your time to nap next to your computer or to actually go home and then come back?
Mhm. Right.
Um,
Right.
and when I was young and naive, my thought process was like, I got to stay and do it. Now I'm an old timer, and I
You
can't
get the
imagine
hell out of
myself doing that. Yeah.
there. Right on. Right on. Yeah, I don't know that I've explicitly done that at an office at any point, but I've certainly. I don't know. Since the pandemic happened, I've had some rough deadline things where it's like I'm kind of just working, and I might as well finish this, and I'm doing well, so I'm going to stick with it. And then the next thing I know, it's like whatever in the morning.
Hmm.
It's kind of. I mean, people talk about that. I do. I do find I've actually experienced it myself, where like the border between like the end of the workday and the start of your evening is now blurred because it's you don't have the commute home to break it up. Um,
Did you ever do all nighters at school?
oh, many times in like university.
Yeah, but I mean,
Oh
like
yeah.
literally at the school.
Yeah, literally at the school all
Yeah,
nighters. Literally at the school all nighters. We
yeah,
had like
like
I had like major projects due back to back, and so I do work on the. I think I did two all nighters in a row once, and I remember
nice.
that time, and I remember how sick I was afterwards.
Yeah. I was in pretty bad health in school. Like I was malnourished, and I would literally like my vision would go black while I was walking down the hallways and stuff.
What?
That
Man,
was
I didn't have that quite happen.
yeah, I had that happen on multiple occasions. Like, uh, and it was like, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet. I'll bet. I'll bet. Well, I was curious since you've worked at all these different places.
Mhm.
Not only it's interesting, you've worked, I guess, kind of you switched industries, and then you've also
Mhm.
switched from like more bigger companies to smaller companies. Kind of just like your experience going through that. First, actually, I'm interested. Just like, I mean, VFX in film versus VFX in
Mhm.
games.
Mhm.
I think you like games better. Maybe that's just because you like games better. I don't know, but how's that transition gone?
Um, well, I think it's interesting now. I mean, I feel like I've always been like fluctuating everything that I do. Like when I went to school, I was doing hand drawn animation, and like I chose a school for that, thinking I probably would be animating characters for Disney or something on their
Really?
huge lineup of 2D films.
Yeah, yeah. 1990. Wait, 2002.
Yeah, yeah.
I, I actually I thought you were like gunning for like more of a digital, like a visual effects type role from the beginning.
I was, but not necessarily consciously.
I see.
Um, like I think when I was in art class back in high school, uh, I don't know. It was like the time of year where people were trying to decide what colleges to apply to and stuff, and I didn't really have a big plan. But I remember like I used to watch Much Music, and they had these little short films that would be put on the air every now and then from the computer animation program at
I
the school
remember
that I went
that.
to.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so that was like a big inspiration to me. And then I think that was around the time that Tarzan had come out as well, the Disney Tarzan.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that was 1999. So I must have just been like seeing it for around the first time on VHS or something, like in the art classroom, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and so I remember there was a sequence where he's like sliding down these tree trunks, and like I was learning about like the tech that went into that, and that was kind of interesting. So I just kind of like made up my mind that like there's a film industry in Halifax. Uh, I should probably do animation. And so I went to the school that was geared for that. So I was doing all that, and it was like, I think it was my second year of the animation program when I finally like figured out what my interests were and realized I didn't give a crap about character animation and I wanted to do effects. Um, so yeah, I kind of started teaching myself effects on the side and got interested in that, and that led into Houdini and doing like procedural 3D stuff instead of anything related to hand drawn. But I found that kind of interesting because like there was this kind of like constant shifting of interests throughout the whole like college period, and then like I went to the software company that makes Houdini, and I was working there, and like kind of getting to have my hand on everything, like doing a little bit of modeling, doing animation, and like material like shading type stuff, and lighting, and like being a generalist basically
Hmm.
is what you'd call that in graphics. Um, but I still kind of had it in my head that VFX is like the thing that I wanted to do. Like there's so much problem solving and like puzzle solving and stuff involved with that. Like I guess kind of in the same lines that you would have with engineering. Like you're constantly figuring out how things work and trying to make it do things in an efficient way.
Hmm.
Um, that always was interesting to me, but I kind of still had it in my head that I wanted to do film. Like that's what I went to animation school. Why am I at a software company? So I eventually quit that and got into film and did VFX for a variety of stuff, like fully CG, mixed CG and live action films. Uh,
Was that hard to
and
get into, or were people I
it's
mean,
it's competitive.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that want to do it. I mean, it's hard for me to have any sort of numbers on
Hmm.
that because like everyone that I went to school with went into like storyboarding or like concept art or
Hmm.
2D stuff. Like there were a few people that went into 3D, but at the time none of them were interested in visual effects.
Right.
So I didn't get to see people applying and failing. I was just like me in my own bubble.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so I don't know. It's the sort of thing where I have typically had. I don't know if I interview well, combined with being generally competent. Um, I've generally been able to choose the places that I work at and stuff. So it's I'm sure there's people that don't have that degree of success. Um,
Cool.
so, but yeah, it is competitive. Like there's thousands of people, I guess that depends on the time period too. Like right now during COVID, like there's so much of a glut in the film industry of like content that needs to be produced, whereas there's just like not enough artists to fill that gap. So it's like I feel like there's a lot of job security for visual effects artists at the moment, where like you've got headhunters trying to poach people from other companies.
Right. Well, from what I gauge, it seems like well, I don't know. Depends what your definition of good is, but generally a secure career, I guess. Or is that not the case at all? I mean, it seems like you jump from company to company, but there's always work.
Yeah, it tends to be not very junior friendly.
Mm.
Um, they tend like a lot of these like the Marvel films and stuff that are coming out. Like there's a lot of complex stuff going on in them,
Hmm.
and so they tend to want to hire more senior people that really know what they're doing instead of juniors. Um, so it can still be hard to break into it, but generally the film studios, like Disney owns practically all of the properties out there, like Disney or
Hmm.
Warner or whoever owns like all the properties, and then they find people to do the work for them on their IPs.
Hmm.
So all the like boutique studios and stuff, like the places I worked at, they generally don't own anything. They're service shops, and they're all like bidding to compete with the other companies. So you'll have like 6 or 7 studios that all are working on like the next Avengers film.
Right.
Um,
And it's like a race to the bottom in a sense.
yeah, yeah, and because it's a race for to the bottom, like margins are tight, and generally when they hire people, they're hiring for the duration of the film. So
Yeah.
it tends to be contract per project, and often they'll have something lined up, and artists can roll from one production onto another production, but it's not always the case. Or it might be the case that if there's a lot of fire in one film and there's nothing but water in the next film, like why would you keep your staff around that has no experience with water, right?
Yeah.
um, so people will get laid off and other people get hired. Some people may decide that they have had enough and just quit entirely. I don't know what it's like for film anymore, but I think the retention for artists in the game industries, it tends to be something like 5 years, and then they switch into a different industry.
Different industry, yeah. That's interesting. I don't know enough about like an art career. I would have thought. I mean, I know game companies have a mixed reputation sometimes, but I would have thought it would be like a generally good career for an artist. What do people typically switch into, if you know?
Honestly, I don't know. I haven't paid all that much attention into it. I know there's a lot of burnout. Like there's a lot of
Hmm.
people who, like I said, early in my career, I felt like it was important to get stuff done for the deadline, and I
Hmm.
did sleep at my desk a couple times. There's some people that never really learn to say no, and to not push back against stuff like that. And I think those people kind of feel like the pressure is too strong and they just want out. Like they don't want to do
Yeah,
60-hour weeks or 90-hour weeks, and they don't realize that they can do a 40-hour week.
yeah,
So they just burn out and quit. Or it's completely also just fair that maybe you're like me, where I'm taking animation and I realize that's not what I want to do. I want to do effects. Some people
yeah,
just they get there, they do the work. The dream that they developed in their head from watching Jurassic Park or Terminator 2 or something isn't necessarily the same as what it's like working, and they decide to get out.
yeah.
Um,
Yep, I can see that. I can see that. Okay. And how long were you in film anyway? It was like quite a while. A decade?
2000, no, not that long. 2009 to 2013. So, I mean, I guess there's your 4 years. Like, if statistically I'm out of the film industry, right?
Yeah, yeah. Right on. Okay.
um, but yeah,
And
I mean, you mentioned earlier, like whether I like doing VFX better in film or games. Like, I think it's a very different experience, and
yeah,
I personally really prefer it in games to film. Um,
interesting. I mean, games,
like
I
it.
guess it's about the real time
Mhm.
nature of it, whereas film, you're just like setting something up to be perfect, have it
Yeah, but
have it be generated. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's got to work from a specific camera angle
Hmm.
and no other camera angle most of the time. So it's like you're really trying to cheat things and
Yeah.
overload it with as much detail and stuff as you can to get everything to work exactly right from that one angle.
Yeah.
Like I said, simulations. If I'm doing a water simulation, it could take like as much as an hour for a frame
Hmm.
on a 24 frame per second production
Yep.
to simulate. So if you're just like waiting, if you're lucky, there's space on the render farm where you can like send that simulation off and do it remotely, and then just continue to do some other stuff on your computer. But that wasn't always the case, and
Hmm.
sometimes you just have to be at your desk sitting there doing nothing while you're waiting for a simulation. Um,
Wow.
and an hour is excessive. Like it's much more likely that it's like 5 minutes a frame or something like that. But it's still like you're waiting
Yeah.
hours for your sequence to finish, and then if it doesn't work right, you got to redo it. So there's a lot of downtime, and I found like there were some times where it's like I was using all the resources on my computer so heavily that like I couldn't even look at YouTube what to pass the time. Uh,
Rough.
yeah. So I don't know. There's something special about the film industry where like there's this um, making stuff work in sequence with other artists and like have all the shots blend together seamlessly, and having something that looks like really overwhelmingly surreal or whatever when you're
Hmm.
looking up on the big screen and then you get to see your name in the credits and stuff. Like there's something magical about that, and it is fun to do. A lot of the problems that you get to solve as an effects artist are like interesting technically. So I did enjoy it, but with games, like a film will have like, I think on Happy Feet 2 we had something like 60 effects artists working on
Hmm.
a 2 hour film, and then on Gears of War 5, or sorry, Gears of War 4, I think we had something like 8 effects artists working on like a 10-hour game.
Right.
So it's like it tends to be much more of like do what you can, and you're given a lot more independence to determine what can get done and what you just have to leave on the editing room floor and not do.
In
Um,
games, you mean?
yeah, like if you're doing like environmental effects for a level or something, it's just like, okay, do I need water dripping off of these tree branches,
Right.
or
Right.
like you do as much as you can, and but at the end of the day, you have to just realize like you can't do everything you want to do, and you just have to uh, compromise a little bit. So it's interesting because like you always have a ton of small tasks, and you have the ability to not do some of them. Like, so I don't know. With film, it was always like, this is what was planned for the shot. This is what's in the surrounding shots. You have to do everything. It like
That's it. Yeah.
you don't have any control over what's getting done. Like there's no independence.
And you prefer the game version of that?
Yeah, like I prefer feeling like I'm making decisions that matter.
Yeah.
And then because everything has to work at real time, I'm not doing these like 5 minute per frame simulations. Like every now and then there might be like like I don't tend to do cinematic stuff. So
Hmm.
like for cinematics, you might still have to do some of that, but for all the in-game stuff, it's tends to be a lot of like constantly working in real time to like develop the materials or the particles, or figuring out the scripting and stuff. Like I'm constantly busy all day long with almost no downtime at all.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, that sounds way better.
Yeah, it's like very actively engaging to do that. That's like I, I guess kind of related because I've I've been branching out of VFX a little bit. Like
Hmm.
my official title now is I'm the effects lead at the studio that I'm at, but I'm also a gameplay designer and a UX designer.
Okay.
Um,
Do you find there's a lot of interplay between the I guess the roles? Like if it was separate people, would they be in separate rooms, or would they work closely together?
um, it varies. Like I've found that I've always been the type of person that like the experience matters to me.
Hmm.
Like so, I'm trying to think of examples. Like I mean, even in film, when you're doing effects work, it's not always just like fire and explosions and water.
Hmm.
Like there's a sequence in Monsters versus Aliens, a DreamWorks film, where there's like the character is um, interacting with like a Dance Dance Revolution dance pad type thing as like an interface for his computer.
Hmm.
And like every time he steps somewhere, like the buttons light up and there's stuff that's going on. It's like that's not what people would typically associate with VFX, but there's like this scripting stuff that's going on with like a UI. Or like if you're looking at Iron Man, as he's looking around, he's got like a HUD that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that sort of stuff is also VFX. Um, Thinking about that world of like how you can interact with stuff and get reactions to happen, like that's always been to me the most interesting part.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I can see that being
uh,
really cool.
so I felt like that kind of definitely plays into like UX. And like I was
Yeah.
realizing that like, when I was on Gears of War 4, I was doing a lot of weapon effects, and like there's stuff where like on the gun you can detect how much ammo you have left, or like depending on whether you're doing a charge shot with your gun versus like a regular shot, like the effects will be different and stuff. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of like communication that happens to the player through the VFX on like how dangerous is this weapon compared to a different weapon, or like is this an ice weapon versus a fire weapon, or something that has implications in the gameplay, where it felt like it was a natural transition from some of that into doing like the more gameplay oriented stuff.
Did you find? I mean, I guess now you're making those decisions if it's in your role, but like
Mm-hmm.
when you were on Gears of War, was that mostly prescriptive, or did they basically they kind of leave it to you? Like, I mean, I imagine the designers want those visual cues and they expect them. So do they
It was
deliver that to you as a as a item to work on, or do you make those decisions
There was a
to some degree?
combination.
Yeah,
Like for one, that was an established franchise, so there's some stuff that we did.
yeah,
Like, I don't know
convention.
if have you played the Gears of War games?
I've
Any of them?
dabbled in them, but I've never like played through them.
Well, there's something I think they called it active reload, where when you would reload your gun, there's like a little progress bar up at the top of the screen, basically to
Mhm.
show you when it's reloading, and there would be like a little tick partway through that progress bar, and if you clicked your button again when the cursor or when the progress bar was over that little tick, then it would reload faster, and your next rounds of bullets would do extra damage.
Okay,
Um, so to illustrate that, it's like if you're shooting your gun at the wall, for example, you've got like all the debris and stuff shooting off of it. But if you've got your active reload bonus, then suddenly we're getting little blue sparks that are coming off of everything.
right, yeah. So
Uh,
it's a game
so
convention.
yeah, so
Yeah,
like there was a language that was like decided for that stuff, like right from Gears of War One, and I couldn't tell you who it was that did that, but like obviously in Gears of War 4, we're still following that
yeah.
convention. So we've got to do some of that stuff, but we did also have like completely new weapons in the game. So like part of it is like determining like what do these things look like. There's like there's different factions in the game. Like there's humans and monsters, and then in 4 there was robots as well. And so we wanted to like make it so that like the weapons from these different factions, like you could tell that they were from those factions. Like everything was more like realistic, I guess, like smoke and muzzle flashes and stuff if you're using humans, whereas it's much more like angular and sharp and like reddish and stuff if it's the monsters, whereas it's like much more like electronic and blue and curvy and stuff if it's the robots.
I see. Yep.
So it's interesting how you could like kind of tell just by looking at the weapon fires like what the it was kind of useful more in the multiplayer. Like you could tell if weapon fire was coming from one part of the arena or another, like by looking at the colors and shapes and stuff. Like, is this a teammate or is it an enemy? And what kind of weapon is it? Like, is it a shotgun or is it a grenade or something? Obviously, it's going to look completely different.
Cool.
But yeah, so a lot of that stuff was convention, but a lot of it was new, and some of that is just like the effects department itself is deciding like what is this particular gun's muzzle flash going to look like versus the stuff where I was saying like the ammo indicator on the gun. That was something that nobody had ever approached me and asked me to do. It was just something I saw, I felt would make the gun look cooler. Like there's a gun that is a sniper rifle that you charge it up and it does more damage when it's charged up, and it's like someone had modeled it in a way where it looked like there was little lights on it, but nobody had really come up with a design for the behavior of those lights. So I like turned those lights into a progress bar as you're charging it, and they would like uh, if you charged that gun for too long, then you lost your ability. Like you were supposed to let go of the trigger when it went to its
Okay. Yeah.
maximum charge. So then I would like have those lights like flicker out and stuff.
It's
And
kind
it,
of
it
neat.
was
So,
it
so you
was
had a
it was
little bit of, I guess, design leeway with what you were doing.
yeah, and it
Yeah.
was I mean that it was something that I like. That team was much bigger than the team I'm on right now. If I ever wanted to do something like that, especially because I was new to Unreal Engine at the time, like if I ever wanted to do stuff like that, I had to go to the weapon designer and like get their seal of approval and get them to program some of that behavior.
Right on.
Um, but as I've slowly like gotten more into programming and stuff, like the production I'm on right now is where I've been using C++ for the first time in production. Like I've finally taken that step so that if I want to have like specific behavior happening when you press a specific button, now I can
You just
create
do it.
those triggers and all the hooks necessary to do it.
Cool. And I guess that's something you like
Yeah.
by the sense of it. Yeah. Yeah. I guess one quick, before we leave film altogether, I
Mm-hmm.
was curious actually on the tooling and what's different and what's the same. Do you still use Houdini?
Yeah. Not as much, but I definitely do. Um,
I guess I don't really understand. I mean, so Houdini does like the modeling and the animation, and then you export that, and then you can bring that into Unreal and apply like behavioral things. Like actually, I don't know much about that piece at all.
Yeah, so it's like it's a DCC package, digital content creation.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that's like Blender or Maya or 3D Studio Max or Houdini, they're all
They
kind
share the
of
format.
similar. Well, yes and no. Like there are common file formats that you can use, like like JPEG is a common
Mm-hmm.
graphics format, but you could also use like GIF to for the sake of forcing the GIF pronunciation. Um, um, so there'll be like OBJ.
Yeah.
I think is like a standard geometry format for Maya, but in Houdini we tend to use BGO. But maybe both will use the Alembic file format as well. Like there's anyway, the point of it, without getting too into the nitty gritties, is that yeah, you can create models in it, and you can create animations, and you can create like particle effects and fluid dynamics effects, like voxel based stuff, and you can create rendered images in the end. So in film, um, rarely I might create geometry and send that to Maya for some reason for animation or something. But mostly I was creating just like final images, um, uh, like the same sort of images that you would see on screen. But
Yeah.
for film, it, like if you have like a live action plate that's been shot, you would have to like create masks and stuff for your fire so that like you're not just seeing fire everywhere, like you're seeing it behind your character, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Um, so you would create a lot of stuff like that, and then you would send it to the compositing department, and they're the ones that would like mix all the different images together and like control the blending of them and the colors and stuff to really fine tune it into what's on screen. Um,
Cool.
whereas in games, like because I'm not as worried about creating final images, I don't tend to use it quite as much. Like so, like in
You don't tend to
Houdini,
use Houdini quite as much, you mean?
right, right.
Yeah.
So, like for example, one thing that I did on there was a project I did called Darwin Project, and there was a character in it that had like little orbs floating around his arms and legs and stuff, like little
Mm-hmm.
energy orbs. And so, if I were doing that 100% for film, like I would set up this simulation that's like everything is just happening in as organic of a way as I possibly can around the skeleton. Um, it might have freedom, like some of those orbs might like leave the one arm and like go over to the other arm or something now and then. Um, I don't know, with it without
Mm-hmm.
getting too into like the style of the
Sure.
effect
Sure.
itself.
Yeah.
Um, but after I do all the particle simulation and stuff, then I would like have to make sure it's working with the lighting and the materials are nice, and then I would just render still images of all those and send that over to the compositor. Whereas with games, because everything has to be working in real time, in Houdini, I didn't do a simulation for those orbs. I did static meshes that get attached onto the as part. They get skinned and rigged as part of the skeleton. So it's
Okay.
just
Yep.
the static geometry that's there. Whenever the animator animates the arms bending or whatever, those orbs just go along for the ride. But I would set it up with information about um, I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. I guess it doesn't matter, but I basically set it up with color information in the geometry, like per vertex.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for anyone who doesn't know, like 3D geometry has like it's made up of polygons, which are typically triangles, and each triangle has a corner, and those corners would be like the vertices. So each vertex on the geometry, I would assign color information, and I would use that color information not for the visual purpose, but as data that explains the orientation of these things and like how fast I might want them to rotate.
Right on. Okay.
And so then when it's in Unreal Engine and we're looking at the animation, it's not until you actually look at the material where I read in that color information from the geometry and I use it and force some animation in the material. So it's looking at that orientation and um, the speed information, and then I'm doing manual rotations per sphere, basically.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And so they're all just looping, and they all have independent loops, but they're all looping.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Uh,
Interesting. So
so
there's kind of this
so
interplay between what you do in Houdini and
yeah,
how you can like interoperate with I don't know, Unreal or whatever other engine you're
yeah,
using.
yeah. It gets to be much more of a case of like I'm thinking of everything all the time as data and like what information can I use to get the results I need later.
Mhm.
So instead of just like pumping velocities into a simulator and it's taking care of it all, I'm like driving all that math myself in a material. So instead of doing it all in Houdini, I figure out the first step of the puzzle in Houdini, and then I export it to Unreal Engine, and then I'm doing the second part of the puzzle there.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. I see. Totally see. Okay.
So it's interesting because I use it for um, a lot more creative problem solving, like hands-on stuff than I used to use it for. Um, but I'm even using it for like when I take it out of the visual effects realm, I'm using it for UI stuff as well. You can work with more than just the 3D software. You can work with 2D images as well. So it's just handy to be able to like do some of that processing in a package like Houdini compared to a package like Photoshop, where you can like automate a lot of the stuff more,
Gotcha.
so
Yeah.
that like when you change your base texture, you can still just like automatically strip it down into like RGB and alpha channels much more easily compared to like in Photoshop. Like trying to turn one image into multiple images can sometimes be a bit of a pain in the butt.
Hmm. I see. Cool. I was wondering. Um, I mean, I could be totally off, but I'm imagining maybe like you get a little more freedom to iterate somewhat in like kind of the real time game version of this. Like, if you're doing a
Yes and
film and
no.
you, okay, I just imagine if you're doing a film and you've already rendered like half the movie, you probably, I mean, it would be a big expense to time and money wise to go back and redo all of that if you decide to change things. Whereas maybe in games, that's going to be situationally the case. But like if there's something you're just exporting everywhere, you could like tweak the model and now it just behaves differently everywhere in the game.
Yeah.
Like, is there a little more of that freedom in a sense?
Well, I mean, definitely. Like
Yeah,
if you look at Sonic the Hedgehog,
sure.
that movie that came out,
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
like that was a big deal, right?
yeah.
Like people looked at that initial trailer and they're like, "Oh, what is this? This is not Sonic. What are we looking at?" And that was a massive undertaking because for them to go
They
back
basically had to
and
restart, didn't they? Like throw away everything, didn't they? I mean, it's probably
a lot of it, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, where I was saying earlier, like where you've got like masks so that the fire appears behind the character instead of in front of the character. Like if you change the silhouette of that character,
it's a different
all
mask.
yeah, like you need a different mask too. It's not just the character that needs to be replaced. It's a lot of other stuff. So yeah, them changing that character, like it wasn't just a case of changing the character and then the next day everything's done. It's like you have to re-render a ton of stuff, possibly have to re-simulate a ton of stuff. Um, in games, we don't have the luxury of doing everything perfectly, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
everything has to work from an arbit. I mean, depends on the game. Like some games have locked cameras, but a lot of games, the player could be changing the camera in the middle of firing their gun or something. Like if it's not
yeah,
a first person, um, so a lot of that stuff just has to work from a really flexible point of view, and we don't necessarily mask stuff the same way. Like we're kind of fine if a fire texture intersects a wall or something. Um, there's a little bit more of forgiveness that's
yeah.
expected from the final product. But so like if you're changing that model, I think it would be rare that it would affect anyone else. Like as long as the underlying rig is the same, like there might be spots where maybe someone else is interacting, like taking something from the character's hand, and now their hand is in a different position, so you have to adjust the other character too. But it it would be a pretty minor thing. You could probably change a character's model like
At
the
the end of the
week
game,
before a game is launched, and there would be very minimal problems with it.
yeah,
So
cool.
in some sense, yes, there's a lot more ability to iterate and do stuff, but it's also like I said earlier, like there's just an overwhelming amount of content that needs to be created by a smaller team
Hmm. Hmm.
that
I see. Yeah,
you can't just iterate forever on stuff. Like you eventually have to just move on, and that's where I was saying like sometimes you just have to say this thing's not getting done.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. Cool.
I
Cool.
I can't I can't remember the quote. There was something about like the production is finished when it ships.
Yeah. Yep. 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 I don't know the quote either, but
It's
there's like
it's
a
it's not a
myriad
case of it's not a case of we
variant.
decide we're done and then we ship. It's
Yeah.
like we have to ship so it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Cool. 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 I guess the one big thing we haven't talked about, you've worked at, I actually don't remember your exact history. I know you've worked at EA and now you're at a smaller studio. There might have been something in between. I don't remember, but like you've gone from the kind of the big AAA to indie transition thing, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
to some degree anyway. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
curious, like, I mean, you've been at your current company a while. I imagine it's more your thing, but just if you could talk at that a little bit, how that's gone, the things that are better, the things that are worse,
I mean, in general, when
generally
you're at a
speaking, yes. Yeah.
whether I mean in general, like my first job was in at an indie software company, right? And it was a small team, and I found that the freedom that I had at that small team was like crazy. Like I could do so many things like
Wear many
self-guided.
hats. Yeah.
Yeah, like whenever I saw something that needed to be done, I could do that, and there was a lot of freedom with that. Whereas I found that when you start working as a service provider, like at the film studios, like that disappears, and it becomes more like this is what needs to be done. Let's do it to spec.
Hmm.
And it's weird because you may have like three different people telling you different specs for the same thing. So sometimes you have no idea what you're doing other than trying to please three different opinions.
Hmm.
Um, whereas in games at the big studios, it was a case of like we owned our own IP, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not at the mercy of the property holder to the same extent. So even at the AAA studios, I found that there was a lot of room for self guidance and self direction.
Okay.
Obviously, it is a team. There is a director, and there are leads and everything, and the nature of it is like you're going to be told what to do. But I think because you're so busy at a studio like that with the tasks, like I said, there's 8 hours of content and like 8 artists or something. Like when I was in film, 2 hours of content for 60 artists. Like there's just a big
Yeah.
difference on the workload. So there wasn't room to provide opinions outside of your area of expertise really at the
Yeah.
AAA
Yeah.
studios. I found it's like you stay in your pigeonhole and do what you're supposed to do, and there wasn't really as much time to explore the rest of the game really.
Yeah.
Whereas again, being back at an indie studio again, um, it feels like everything matters. There's like a very big shortage of people on the production, so like if you have an opinion about the gameplay as an effects artist, simply may be the case that nobody else on the team had that idea, and you raise it, and people may not like the idea, and it may go nowhere, but people may also listen to it, and it feels really nice getting to share your opinion and be listened to.
Yeah. And I guess you're in a position now where you have that credibility as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've got three job titles now, and I think it was taking the initiative in the first place. Like when I was on the last project, I was effects artist, but
Hmm.
I would play the game and I'd be like, I really wish we were doing this thing with the haptics. I really wish we were doing this thing with the sound. Like, I really would. Taking some
Hmm.
of that gameplay experience on like the feedback on what the weapons are doing, like I was introducing that from the effects department into the gameplay on Darwin Project, and explaining why effects might be a certain color or something because it has an influence on the gameplay. Where it was able to definitely give me some credibility, which is why I've got the three different titles now, and it's a little bit more official that like if I've got an opinion on the haptics, uh, we should probably implement it.
Cool. That's the credibility I refer to.
Yeah.
Cool. 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 Very cool. Very cool. So not going back to AAA anytime soon.
I don't know. I think we mentioned last time just the idea of like, would I ever move again? It's like, I've got 15 years left in my career. I'm not ruling anything out.
Right.
Um,
So that
but
could entail a AAA company or something.
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I'm happy where I am right now.
Yeah.
It's getting that freedom to have an opinion on the gameplay and share that as an effects artist is something that like I said, I don't think I would have that going back to a AAA company. Um, so
Is there any
it's
way? Yeah, I guess one question. Like, I mean, would it be conceivable that like a AAA company could hire you into a role where you had that? Like, if you were like a, I don't know, like a director or something?
yeah,
Or is it
like
hard to move from a smaller company to a big company in a higher level role without the big company experience kind of rising the ranks there?
I don't know. Like statistically, I haven't done any sort of research into that, so I don't know. I've
Hmm.
always felt like expressing a healthy amount of um, initiative and relentlessness can help you move into anything.
Yeah.
Like I guess there's that whole idea of con men where like the original term was confidence men. It's like if you behave, if you dress the part and act the part, people will believe you deserve it.
Yeah.
It's like if you take someone's access card for a law firm or something and just try to go in, like people are going to look at you in your t-shirt and jeans and be like, well, what are you doing here? You don't belong. But
Yeah.
uh, I don't know. I suspect that if you do a good job and can can kind of back up your opinions in a sound way, uh, you're going to have uh, credibility anywhere you go. But
Cool.
yeah, it's a case of where like effects artists are effects artists at larger companies, and if I were to be in that type of position where I'm having a say in a large variety of stuff, I would need to be in something like a creative director role or something, or a gameplay director role or something, where you're not necessarily doing the hands-on stuff anymore so much as like maybe playing the game and providing feedback and having lots of meetings and stuff about it. It's the small indie studios are definitely nice in that regard, where you get to also do hands-on.
Cool. Cool, cool. Well, congrats. I hope it goes well. Continues to go well for you. I have to run, so
Yeah.
it's over when it's over, right?
Yep. It's over. It's done when it ships.
Yeah. Press the button.
All right.
Cool, cool.
Well,
All right,
see you
man.
next time.
Yeah. Take care.